Kate Wilson felt the artificial gravity kick in as the transport shuttle docked with Titan Military Academy. Through the small porthole, she could see the massive space station stretching out like a metallic city in the void. Ships of every size and shape moved around it like busy insects. The airlock hissed open, and Kate grabbed her single duffel bag. She'd packed light, just the basics and a few personal items she couldn't leave behind. The corridor beyond was huge, designed to accommodate beings much larger than humans. The ceiling stretched up at least 20 feet, and the walls were covered with symbols she didn't recognize. Other new cadets moved past her in small groups. Most were twice her size or bigger. The Karathi looked like walking dinosaurs with their scaled skin and sharp teeth. Their voices rumbled when they spoke. The Vex scuttled along on 6 legs, their chitinous armor clicking against the metal floors. The Lumins floated rather than walked, their translucent bodies glowing softly in different colors. Kate followed the signs toward the classroom sections. A few aliens glanced at her, but most ignored her completely. She was used to that. Humans were still pretty new to galactic society, and most species saw them as harmless little creatures who got lucky with technology. Combat theory was held in a large amphitheater with curved rows of seats. Kate found her assigned spot and sat down, placing her datapad on the small desk. The chair was too big for her, clearly made for larger beings. Her feet barely touched the floor. Well, what do we have here? Kate looked up to see a massive Karathi standing in the aisle. He had to be at least 7 feet tall, with broad shoulders and arms covered in ritual scars. His yellow eyes had vertical pupils like a snake, and they were fixed right on her. "I'm Corax," he said, not bothering to sit down. "Son of War Chief Corax the Destroyer. My family has served in the galactic military for 12 generations. Kate nodded politely. "Nice to meet you." Corax laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "Another soft skin," he announced to the nearby students. Several Karathi and Vex turned to look. "Look how tiny it is. I could snap it in half with one hand." A female Karathi nearby hissed with amusement. "Why do they even let humans in here? This is a warrior academy, not a daycare center." Kate opened her datapad and started reviewing the class materials. She'd learned long ago that responding to bullies usually made things worse. Better to stay quiet and let them get bored. "It's ignoring us," Korak said, sliding into the seat next to her. The chair groaned under his weight. "How rude. Where I come from, younglings show respect to their betters." Kate looked up at him with a small smile. It wasn't a happy smile or a friendly one. It was the kind of smile that made something cold crawl up your spine. Several students who saw it suddenly found other places to look. The instructor entered the classroom, another Karathi, but older, with gray scales and multiple battle scars across his face and arms. He wore the uniform of a military veteran, with ribbons and medals covering his chest. "I am Commander Vortok," he announced in a voice that could shake walls. "For the next semester, I will attempt to teach you the basics of orbital warfare. Most of you will fail. Those who don't will wish they had." He activated a holographic display, showing a space battle. Ships moved in complex patterns, firing energy weapons and launching missiles. "Today we discuss assault tactics for fortified positions. Who can tell me the standard approach?" Several hands shot up. Commander Vortok pointed to a Vex student. "Overwhelming firepower, sir. Destroy their defenses, then move in with ground forces." "Acceptable," Vortok nodded, "but not always practical. What if you lack superior firepower?" Kate raised her hand. She'd studied human military history extensively, and humans had faced that exact problem many times. "Yes, the human," Vortok said. "You could use multiple smaller attacks to divide their attention," Kate said. "Hit them from different angles, so they can't focus their defenses in one place. Or use stealth units to take out key systems from inside." Korak snorted loudly. "The human thinks it knows warfare," he said to his friends. "What would a soft-skin know about real combat? Humans hide behind their machines because they're too weak to fight." His comment got chuckles from several other students. Kate felt dozens of eyes on her, waiting to see how she'd react. She lowered her hand and returned to her notes, still wearing that same unsettling smile. Inside, she was already planning how this semester was going to go. 3 weeks had passed since Kate Wilson started at Titan Military Academy, and her daily routine had become predictable in all the wrong ways. Every morning when she entered combat theory class, Korax would be waiting with some new way to make her life difficult. It started small. He'd stretch his massive legs into the aisle just as she walked by, forcing her to step around him. When she sat down, he'd lean over and knock her datapad to the floor with his elbow, then apologize loudly so everyone would look. So sorry, Softskin. Sometimes I forget how tiny human things are. During class discussions, no matter what Kate said, Korax had something to add. If she mentioned flanking maneuvers, he'd interrupt with, "That might work for humans who run from real fights." If she talked about defensive positions, he'd laugh and say, "Humans are experts at hiding. I'll give them that." The worst part wasn't even Korax himself. It was watching other students join in. The female Karathi named Zara would hiss with laughter at his comments. A group of Vex students started clicking their mandibles mockingly whenever Kate spoke. Even some of the quieter species began treating her like she didn't belong. Kate tried different approaches. She sat in different seats, but Korax would just move to bother her there. She tried ignoring him completely, but that only made him try harder to get a reaction. She even tried being friendly, offering to share her notes or help with assignments. That just gave him more opportunities to insult her. "Look," Korax said one morning, loud enough for half the class to hear, "the human wants to help me with tactics. That's like a pet trying to teach its owner how to hunt." The breaking point came during physical training. The class was practicing hand-to-hand combat in pairs. Kate had been matched with Zix, a young Vex student who was actually pretty friendly. They'd been working together for a week, and Zix was one of the few aliens who treated Kate like a normal person. They were practicing basic grappling moves when Korax approached. "Mind if I show the insect how real warriors train?" he asked their instructor. Before anyone could object, Korax had grabbed Zix and demonstrated a throw that sent the Vex student flying across the mat. But instead of a controlled training move, Korax put real force behind it. Zix hit the wall with a sickening crack, his chitinous armor splitting along one side. "Oops," Korax said, grinning as medical staff rushed over. His yellow eyes found Kate. Perhaps if you train with real warriors instead of insects, accidents like this wouldn't happen. Kate knelt beside Zix as the medics worked. Green fluid was leaking from cracks in his shell, and his compound eyes were dim with pain. "I'll be okay," he whispered to her in his clicking language. "Don't let him see you angry." But Kate wasn't angry. She was something much colder than that. That evening, long after training halls had emptied and most students were back in their dorms, Kate made her way to the Combat Simulation Center. The facility was open 24 hours for students who wanted extra practice, though few used it late at night. She signed in with the automated system and selected a private simulation pod. The menu offered hundreds of different training scenarios, everything from basic weapon handling to complex tactical situations. Most students stuck to the standard academy programs designed for their level. Kate scrolled past all of those to a section marked Advanced Archives. She entered her access codes and pulled up files that made the computer ask twice if she was sure about her selections. Terran Conflict Archives, Proxima Campaign, flashed on the screen. Warning: extreme content. Recommended only for veteran personnel. Kate selected it anyway. The simulation loaded, and suddenly she was standing on a barren world under an alien sun. Explosions echoed in the distance, and the acrid smell of burned metal filled her nostrils. Around her, virtual soldiers moved with deadly precision through urban ruins. She ran scenario after scenario. Asymmetric warfare protocols put her in situations where she was outnumbered 10-1. Survival combat. Extreme scenarios threw her into battles that most cadets couldn't even watch without getting sick. Hour after hour, Kate fought virtual wars that the Academy's regular curriculum wouldn't cover for another 3 years. She practiced moves that weren't in any textbook and used tactics that would horrify most instructors. Other students occasionally walked past the simulation center on their way to late study sessions. Through the small windows, they could see Kate inside the pods, moving like a ghost through digital battlefields. The scenario she was running showed up on the public log, and soon word spread about the crazy human who spent her nights fighting wars. Most aliens thought she was just trying too hard to prove herself. They had no idea she was remembering things she'd spent years trying to forget. By the time Kate finally logged out each night, her uniform was soaked with sweat and her hands were shaking. But her eyes held something that made even the cleaning staff avoid looking directly at her. Corax had no idea what he was really dealing with, but he was about to find out. The dining hall at Titan Military Academy was massive, designed to feed thousands of cadets from dozens of different species. Long tables stretched across the space, each one accommodating the various sizes and needs of alien students. The Karathi sat at reinforced tables that could handle their weight. The Vex preferred elevated platforms where they could perch. The Lumins didn't eat solid food at all, instead absorbing energy from special charging stations along the walls. Kate Wilson sat alone at a human-sized table near the back, working her way through what the Academy called breakfast. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't exactly home cooking either. She'd learned to appreciate the simple fact that it was edible for human biology, which wasn't something every species could say about the cafeteria food. The morning crowd was typical. Groups of aliens clustered by species, talking loudly in their various languages. The Karathi bellowed at each other across tables. The Vex clicked and chirped in rapid conversations. The Lumins communicated through color changes that flickered like aurora across their translucent bodies. Kate had gotten used to eating alone. A few aliens had tried being friendly at first, but Corax's constant harassment made most of them keep their distance. Nobody wanted to become his next target. She was reading a tactical manual on her datapad, trying to focus on her studies, when the conversation at the Karathi table suddenly got louder. She looked up to see Corax standing, his massive frame towering over seated friends. His yellow eyes were fixed directly on her. "I'm tired of watching this pathetic display," Corax announced, his voice carrying easily across the huge dining hall. Conversations began to die as heads turned toward him. "For weeks, I've watched this soft-skin pretend to be a warrior. It's embarrassing." Kate set down her fork and looked back at him calmly. Around the hall, hundreds of alien students were starting to pay attention. The Karathi at nearby tables were grinning, sensing drama. Even the usually indifferent Lumins were shifting colors with interest. "I challenge a human to formal combat assessment," Corax declared, spreading his arms wide. His voice echoed off the high ceiling. "Let's end this farce once and for all." The dining hall fell completely silent. Formal combat challenges were rare at the Academy. They were usually reserved for settling serious disputes between students, and they required official approval from the instructors. But they were also completely legal under Academy regulations. "You hide behind instructors and regulations," Corax continued, taking a step toward Kate's table. "You speak in class like you know warfare, but you've never faced real combat. Face me in the arena, soft-skin. Let everyone see what humans are truly worth." Kate looked around the hall. Every eye was on her now. She could see the excitement on alien faces, the anticipation of watching a spectacle. Most of them probably expected her to back down, to make some excuse and slink away in shame. She took a sip of her coffee, chewed thoughtfully on her last bite of food, and dabbed her mouth with a napkin. Then she stood up slowly, her human height making her look tiny compared to the 7-foot Karathi. "I accept," she said quietly. The hall exploded in excited chatter. Students leaned over tables to talk to friends. Several aliens immediately pulled out communication devices to spread the news. At the Karathi table, Corax's friends were slapping him on the back and roaring with laughter. Corax grinned, showing rows of sharp predator teeth. "Excellent. Finally, the soft skin shows some spine." He paused, savoring the moment. Standard Academy equipment and rules, energy weapons set to training levels. Kate considered this for a moment. Academy equipment was designed to be safe for all species. Standardized energy weapons that could stun without causing permanent damage. Protective armor that adapted to different physiologies. Medical monitors that would stop the fight if anyone got seriously hurt. "Actually," Kate said, "I prefer standard human military kit, if that's acceptable." This caused a wave of confused murmuring throughout the hall. Human military equipment was considered primitive by galactic standards. Most alien species had moved beyond kinetic weapons and simple armor centuries ago. It would be like showing up to a modern battle with a sword and shield. A vexed student at a nearby table clicked his mandibles in confusion. Why would she handicap herself like that? Maybe she's hoping for a sympathy victory, suggested his friend. Corax threw back his head and laughed, a sound like grinding stone. Your funeral, soft skin. I was gonna go easy on you, but if you want to make this interesting... He cracked his knuckles, producing sounds like breaking branches. Kate nodded politely and returned to her seat. She finished the rest of her coffee, while chaos erupted around her. Students were already placing bets, arguing about odds, and debating whether the fight would last more than 30 seconds. 10 credits says a human doesn't land a single hit, she heard someone say. I'll take that bet, another voice replied. But only if we're talking about her landing a hit before she gets knocked unconscious. The betting pools were forming fast. By the time Kate gathered her things and left the dining hall, the odds were running about 50 to 1 against her. Most aliens seemed to think this would be over quickly. Kate walked toward her first class of the day, ignoring the stares and whispered comments that followed her down the corridor. Inside, she was already planning how the next few hours would go. She had equipment to request. Word spread through Titan Military Academy faster than wildfire. By the time the official combat assessment was scheduled, every available seat in the arena was filled. Students who couldn't get seats crowded around viewing screens in common areas throughout the station. Even some instructors had quietly slipped in to watch, though they tried to look disapproving of the whole spectacle. The arena itself was impressive, a circular space about 100 feet across, surrounded by energy barriers that could stop everything short of a direct hit from a battleship. The floor was made of adaptive smart metal that could change configuration for different types of combat. Today it was set to basic terrain, flat ground with a few scattered obstacles for cover. Kate Wilson stood in the preparation room beneath the arena, checking her gear one final time. The Academy quartermaster had been confused by her equipment requests, but regulations said students could use their species' standard military kit for formal challenges. What Kate had requested was certainly standard for human military forces, even if it looked primitive compared to galactic technology. Her armor was simple ceramic and metal plating. Nothing fancy, just protection for vital organs. Her weapons were equally basic. A kinetic rifle that fired metal projectiles, a sidearm, and a few small devices that most aliens wouldn't recognize. No energy shields, no plasma weapons, no gravity manipulators. Just human engineering at its most practical. Above her, she could hear the crowd getting louder. They were chanting Corax's name, working themselves into excitement. The betting pools had grown throughout the day. Last she'd heard, the odds were running nearly 100 to 1 against her. The preparation room's intercom crackled to life. Combatants, prepare for entry. Kate took a deep breath and walked toward the lift that would carry her up to the arena floor. Through the walls, she could hear the announcer's voice booming over the crowd noise. In the red corner, representing the proud warrior tradition of the Karathi Empire, Corax the Bold, son of War Chief Corax the Destroyer, heir to 12 generations of military excellence. The crowd erupted in cheers and roars. Through the arena's sound system, Kate could hear Corax bellowing back at them, working the audience into a frenzy. Her lift reached arena level, and the gate began to open. In the blue corner, the announcer continued, his voice noticeably less enthusiastic, representing Earth and the human species, Cadet Kate Wilson. Kate stepped into the arena. The noise hit her like a physical force. Thousands of aliens cheering, booing, and making sounds she couldn't identify. The lights were blindingly bright after the dim preparation room. Across the arena, Corax was putting on a show. He wore ceremonial armor that gleamed under the lights, covered in traditional war markings of his people. His face was painted in complex patterns that told the story of his family's military achievements. He carried an energy lance that crackled with barely contained power and wore a personal shield generator that shimmered around him like heat waves. The crowd loved it. They roared approval as he raised his weapons above his head and bellowed a war cry in the Karathi language. Kate walked to her mark, wearing gear that looked like museum pieces by comparison. The crowd's reaction was noticeably more subdued. She could hear scattered comments from the audience. Is that really all the equipment she's bringing? Those weapons look ancient. Do they even work in space? This is going to be over fast. The referee, a neutral Lumine whose body glowed soft blue, floated between them. Standard Academy rules apply. No lethal force. Medical monitors will stop the fight if either combatant is in danger of permanent injury. Combat ends when one participant yields or is rendered unconscious. Kate and Korax both nodded their understanding. The referee drifted upward, out of the combat zone. Combatants ready? Korax raised his energy lance and roared another war cry. The crowd cheered louder. Kate simply nodded and shifted her weight slightly. To most observers, she looked calm. A few of the more experienced warriors in the audience noticed something else. The way she held herself, the way her eyes tracked movement, the subtle tension in her muscles. Begin, the referee announced. Korax charged immediately. 7 feet of armored reptilian fury, energy weapons blazing, shield crackling with defensive power. He covered the distance between them in seconds, lance aimed straight at Kate's center mass. The crowd was on their feet, expecting to see the human vaporized or at least knocked unconscious by the impact. Kate moved, but she didn't move like a student. She didn't even move like most soldiers. She flowed like water finding its way around stone, like shadows shifting with the light. Her first step took her out of Korax's charge path by inches. Her second step positioned her at an angle that made his shield useless. Her third step brought her inside his weapon's effective range. The crowd's cheers turned to confused murmurs. Korax spun, trying to bring his lance to bear, but Kate was already gone. She moved like she could predict where he was going before he knew it himself. Every time he turned to face her, she was somewhere else, always in the exact spot that made his superior reach and firepower irrelevant. Then she started hitting back. Her first shot took out his shield generator with surgical precision. The second disabled his primary weapon. She moved between his attacks like she was dancing, never wasting a motion, never being where his weapons were aimed. Within minutes, the arena had gone silent except for the sound of combat. Korax was beginning to realize with growing horror that he wasn't fighting a scared student trying to prove herself. He was fighting something that treated combat like breathing. The arena had gone completely silent. Not the kind of quiet you get when people are waiting for something to happen, but the heavy, shocked silence that comes when something impossible has just occurred right in front of your eyes. Korax lay flat on his back in the center of the combat zone. His ceremonial armor cracked in several places, his weapons scattered around him like broken toys. He was breathing hard, but otherwise unharmed. Kate had been incredibly precise. Every shot, every move calculated to disable rather than destroy. She could have killed him a dozen times over, but she'd chosen not to. Kate herself stood a few feet away, her simple human gear barely showing anywhere from the fight. Her breathing was steady, her stance relaxed. She looked like someone who had just finished a light training exercise rather than a formal combat that was supposed to test her limits. The thousands of alien spectators in the arena's seats were frozen in place, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Many of them had bet money on this fight, ending quickly. They'd been right about that part, but completely wrong about who would be left standing. The silence stretched on until it became uncomfortable. Then the arena's intercom system crackled to life with the voice of Dean Vortash, the Academy's highest-ranking official. Cadet Wilson. The Dean's voice carried clearly through the arena's acoustics. Where did a civilian student acquire such combat proficiency? Kate looked up toward the observation deck where the Academy leadership sat during formal events. Her voice carried clearly in the silent space, reaching every corner of the arena without her having to shout. "Civilian?" she asked, and there was something in her tone that made several aliens in the crowd shift uncomfortably. "Sir, I'm Major Kate Wilson, retired. Terran Defense Force, 3rd Reconnaissance Battalion. I served 14 years active duty, including 5 combat deployments in the Centauri conflict." The words hit the crowd like a physical shockwave. Conversations that had been starting to bubble up died instantly. The Centauri conflict was legendary among military circles throughout the galaxy. It had been a brutal 6-year war fought across multiple star systems, with casualty rates that made even veteran soldiers sick to think about. I'm here on the veteran education program, Kate continued, walking over to where Korax was slowly getting to his feet. She offered him a hand up, which he took after a moment of hesitation. Figured I should learn how the rest of the galaxy approaches tactics and strategy. As Kate helped him stand, Korax stared at her with a completely different expression than he'd worn for the past month. The arrogant superiority was gone, replaced by something that might have been respect or possibly fear. Kate began walking toward the arena exit, her simple gear making soft sounds against her uniform. The crowd parted before her without even thinking about it. Aliens who had been laughing at her just hours before now couldn't meet her eyes. "Wilson," Korax called out as she reached the gate. His voice cracked slightly. "That thing you wear on your uniform, the small pin. What is it?" Kate paused and looked back at him. For the first time since entering the arena, her expression softened slightly. She reached up and touched a small metal object pinned to her collar. It was simple, unadorned, just a piece of steel shaped into a rectangle with tiny writing etched into its surface. "Memorial pin," she said quietly, "bears the names of my unit. 41 humans who held Firebase Delta for 22 hours against impossible odds. We were supposed to buy 6 hours for civilian transports to escape the system." The arena was so quiet now that her words seemed to echo off the walls. Every alien present was hanging on her every word. "The enemy threw everything they had at us," Kate continued, still touching the pin. "We had no reinforcements coming, no resupply, no air support. Just 42 soldiers and whatever ammunition we could carry." She paused, looking down at the small piece of metal. By the time relief forces arrived, there was only one of us left. She looked back up at the crowd, her eyes finding faces throughout the audience. They were the real warriors. I'm just the one who made it home to tell their story. Kate turned and walked through the arena gate. The heavy doors closed behind her with soft hiss, leaving several thousand aliens sitting in complete silence. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then quiet conversations began to spread through the crowd like ripples on water. Students who had spent weeks laughing at the weak human were suddenly remembering every interaction they'd had with her. The way she'd stayed calm during Korax's harassment. The late nights in the combat simulation center. That unsettling smile she'd worn when provoked. By the time the arena began to empty, word was already spreading throughout the academy and beyond. The databases were being searched, military records were being pulled, and a new understanding was forming. Humans might look small and fragile compared to other species, but looks, as everyone was learning, could be very deceiving indeed.